You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back. It's been a while, as I said earlier, but I always enjoyed having Mitchell Silk with us. He's brilliant. And what can I say? He really is. He speaks Mandarin, Cantonese. He's Hasidic. He's written books on their relations to Berdichev. But he actually had a very important role in the Trump administration. During the first Trump administration, he was a former assistant secretary for international markets at the U.S. Department of Treasury, the first Hasidic Jew confirmed by the Senate for a senior federal role. He has 30 years in law and finance. He's led significant trade agreements, graduate Georgetown University. He's worked with the Jewish community, and his latest book is called A Seat at the Table, an inside account of Trump's global economic revolution. Thank you for joining us.
So good to be here, Zev. Always great to see you. I really appreciate you having me on.
I really appreciate you too. You've done quite a bit. I'm impressed, and we'll talk about your background. But I know you were in the first Trump administration. Did you consider going back to the second Trump administration?
I always consider going back in. It's a great opportunity to serve one's country. I'm very busy and engaged in a couple of large projects in my professional capacity. So I think the call of service is going to need to wait a little while.
Okay, fine. But you were there in the first administration. First of all, let's begin. How did you learn to speak Cantonese and Mandarin? It's not typical for a Hasidic person or even anybody Jewish to speak fluent Cantonese Mandarin. You started out working in a Chinese restaurant. You ended up being with diplomats and negotiating big deals with the United States and China.
You're absolutely correct, Zev. I did not take the traditional path. In the book, I refer to my 4 Ps: perseverance, progress over perfection, personal touch, and providence. And the Chinese, and particularly ending up working in a Chinese restaurant, or should I say starting to work in a Chinese restaurant, really was a twist of providence in my eyes, and very much shaped the whole of my professional life. I found myself just after bar mitzvah. Our family had moved from Chicago to South Florida. Our family finances and family circumstances required me to go out to work to help my mother. And I found a job working with some friends in a Chinese restaurant. My first position was in the back.
Washing dishes, right?
Absolutely. I washed dishes in the kitchen of a non-air conditioned kitchen of a Chinese restaurant in South Florida. It got very hot every day, particularly during the summer. I also did prep work. I cut up 100-pound bags of cabbage and onions. I slowly made my way up the ladder and was promoted to busboy and then waiter. And that was the beginning of the beginning. The Chinese language skills that I acquired afforded me the opportunity to formally study Chinese. And then I went on to do my undergraduate career at Georgetown, the School of Foreign Service. That led to a career in Chinese law. The Chinese law career led to a specialty in energy and infrastructure. And it was China and energy and infrastructure that really drew the interest of the first administration, because those were 2 areas of primary importance to the president when he campaigned before Trump 45.
Now, your mother, I think, was very accomplished, but she separated from your father. That's what put you in a situation where you had to work at an early age.
That's right.
Now, now you spoke Chinese fluently. You actually lived in Taiwan. You lived in China itself. So when you were part of the team that negotiated Chinese deals, now, did they look at odd that a Hasidic-looking man was speaking Chinese? Did they find that interesting or amusing to them?
It's hard for me to say what the folks on the other side of the table, how they viewed me. I can say that I knew a lot of the people that we were negotiating against. From my prior work, I had a career representing foreign investors and banks and financial institutions in China for over 30 years. So I knew a lot of the players. I know that they all respected me. The funny thing about it, Zev, is that all of the negotiations were governed by the highest level of formality and protocol. Each side had its own designated official translator. So I wasn't allowed to speak Chinese. I could only intervene. I could only speak in English. But I do remember there was one instance where we were in Beijing. We were being looked after by a really, really stellar translation team from our U.S. Embassy in Beijing. And the fellow that had been doing translation work for over 30 years, who was probably one of the best in the world, was having a not great day. He was under the weather, like heavily under the weather. And I was sitting at the table with then Secretary Ross, Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, and we were negotiating the energy stream of the trade issues. And the translator was not on his game, and he wasn't really getting it, what the secretary was saying. So at one point I just interrupted and I spoke in Chinese to the Chinese side. Our translator took extreme umbrage, and then he translated what I said into English for the secretary. So it was an interesting interaction.
But you write in your book, Steve Mnuchin, who you worked under, there was a time where the Chinese played games, and we'll talk about how the President Trump was able to challenge the Chinese, where they got away with a lot over the years. But you write in your book where they play games where all of a sudden, the last minute, they gave documents. After you had a deal almost in place, they gave you documents in Chinese where they expect you to know what it was. So you had to translate it in a short period of time right before the meeting.
You can call it inducing heavy schwitz, is what I recall. I had spent the better part of a couple of weeks preparing the draft of the document that we first tabled for the Chinese that ultimately led to the Phase 1 trade agreement. And I worked on that draft. I presented it to the interagency, a couple of the other agencies, mainly the USTR, refined the draft, expanded it, and we sent it across more than a week prior to our first meeting. We flew, and that was meant to be the discussion draft that we were going to use for the upcoming negotiations. We went over, our delegation was probably 100 people for the meeting. We hit the ground in the morning. Our meetings were around 10 in the morning. Our meetings were slated for around noon or 1 o'clock, and we went to the embassy for a pre-huddle. The core team convened in a skiff, a compartmentalized room where with the heaviest of protections for security purposes. And one of the counselors from our embassy in Beijing said that the Chinese that morning had just delivered a draft document, all in Chinese, no English translation.
Purposely to undermine your negotiations.
Yeah, and so we took the view, and Secretary Mnuchin made the call that we were not going to pay attention to their draft, but nonetheless, from the embassy on the way over to the meeting hall, I was put in the back of the limo with the secretary with this document in my hand, and we were barreling down the thoroughways in Beijing. We had a police escort, unheard of in China, and we were just whizzing by with the sirens going. And I was grappling with a couple of technical terms as we were going, but we finally got there. 20 minutes seemed like 3 seconds, and that was that. It was an interesting experience. The secretary was not having any of it. After the formal introductions, the secretary thanked the vice premier for their draft document and said, "No, thank you. We thank you for the document, but no, thank you. We're going to use the draft that we, the U.S. side, put on the table."
And they went along with it.
They certainly did, sir.
Now, you write, now there is protocol, and certainly they take umbrage very easily. Now, you write an incident about a chair where they purposely left one chair out for a member of your delegation. There was a whole incident regarding the chair, and you saved the situation. Tell us about that.
It was political theater at its best, Zev. If you can imagine this, we were meeting in the Diaoyutai guest house. This is a beautiful complex that was built in the Qing dynasty, lakes, many different traditional architectural Chinese buildings. We were in a very big hall that was large enough to seat a couple hundred people. We were in our motorcade. We got to the destination. our team filed out of, many, many cars. We were greeted by the Chinese and then ushered in, a lot of high energy in the air, ushered into this hall. Everybody knew where they were sitting because all of the seating and other protocols were settled during lengthy, detailed negotiations between two
Is that more complicated in dealing with some of the trade deals?
I didn't take part in those discussions, but I imagine so. It was headed by the protocol folks at our embassy in Beijing and the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs Protocol Department. We ushered in, everybody took their seats, and Nebuch, this career official who'd been working on this matter for a long time, found himself without a seat. He had to leave the room. If you didn't have a seat, couldn't stay in the room, he left the room. I'm sure that he was extraordinarily impacted.
So you didn't have a seat at the table, which is what your book is about, the seat at the table.
You always need
it. How did you resolve it? Because you used some Yiddish chachma to get around it.
Well, you know what? Little bit of Jewish guilt never hurt. We were in for about an hour. We took a break. I was pretty close to the door, so I got out pretty quickly, and I saw the DCM, the number 2 at our embassy, in heated discussion with the head of the protocol department from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And they were going at it for about an hour, this chair issue, one chair. So I walked up and I asked our DCM what the story was. And he said we negotiated everything. There was supposed to be another chair. He expects that they were upset because they felt that we had snubbed their vice premier on the visit that he took to Washington a couple of weeks.
President Trump snubbed him, correct?
Yeah, that was the view. That's what we thought. And because of that, they gave us one less chair. And so in my best Chinese, I spoke with the protocol officer from the Chinese side. He wasn't having any of it. I ramped it up a little bit, and that wasn't going anywhere. I knew that a full-blown altercation was not going to be good. And thankfully for me, the governor of the People's Bank of China, a fellow named Yi Gang, who we knew and I knew very well, he did his PhD in the States. We had just received him at Treasury a couple of weeks prior. He happened to be walking by. Imagine this, the head of the Central Bank of China walks by. He was on the Chinese negotiating team. And I called him over and I said, Governor Yi, we have a little issue here. What's the issue? I explained it to him. And he was going back and forth with as a very senior official, certainly had rank over the protocol officer, and he just simply couldn't get anywhere with the protocol officer. He was digging his feet in. So I said, this is enough. I turned to the governor and I said to him in Mandarin, I said, Governor Yi, I look forward to your next visit to the United States. And I said it directed toward the governor, but really it was directed at the protocol officer. Please come to visit me at my house next time that you're in DC. I would love to host you for a dinner. I will serve you wonderful delicacies. I will pour you wonderful Israeli wine. And you know what? You can have as many seats at my table as you like. And I walked away. And guess what? A seat showed up after the break.
Amazing story. Our guest is Mitchell Silk. His fascinating book is called The Seat at the Table, Inside Account of Trump's Global Economic Revolution. He has the distinction of being the first Hasidic Jew confirmed by the Senate for a senior federal role. He was former Assistant Secretary for International Markets at the U.S. Department of Treasury. Also written a series of books on, actually translated the Kedushas Levi, Bechumish, a wonderful, wonderful accomplishment as well. We're going to be right back. If you'd like to chime in, by the way, we'll try to squeeze in a couple of phone calls. 212-769-1925. 212-769-1925. If you want to speak to Mitchell about some of his amazing accomplishments, you can either do that or you can email us. Email's a wonderful way to get some of your questions answered. Zev@talklinenetwork.com. Zev@talklinenetwork.com. Coming up in a little bit, we'll speak to Marty Dolan. He's running for public advocate in the city of New York. Heshi Tish is running for city council. Will be joining us. And then we'll look at an interesting story of a man who spent 20 years in jail and for petty thievery, for burglary. I'm referring to Nati Weiss. He's now battling to save Lakewood's Jewish gangs from the same faith. That's right. You'll get to hear what it's all about. So you don't want to miss our very special broadcast. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. Stay tuned. This is the Talkline Network. I'm Zev Brenner.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back. Mitchell Silka is our guest, former Assistant Secretary for International Markets at the U.S. Department of Treasury, the first Hasidic Jew confirmed by the Senate for a senior federal role. He speaks Cantonese and Mandarin. He's written Svarim, and his latest book in English is called A Seat at the Table, an inside account of Trump's global economic revolution. Let's go to Shlomo on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Your question for our guest. Go ahead, Shlomo.
Yeah, first, I'm happy that there's a man like Kiddush and this man is what the Chacham, what those who come from, they will great. Here he is as a youth, teenager, washing dishes, etc. He dug in the American dream. He worked very hard, and it's a big Kiddush Hashem. Now, my question is, do you have any other stories about Kiddush Hashem in the work that you did, because you're reflecting your Hadus, Yushkai? Any other stories you have from your work that you could inspire us with?
Good question. I'll let him respond to you.
Well, Shlomo, very nice to hear from you. I'll give you a really simple answer. I kind of feel like every minute that I was on the Treasury campus, which is a part of the White House campus, was an opportunity for one of two things. It was an opportunity either for a Kiddush Hashem or a Chilul Hashem, for an opportunity to sanctify God's name or not. And what I mean by that is that every second that I walked, from the minute that I walked into the gate through a couple of Secret Service channels, walking the halls, leaving the Treasury building, going over to the White House frequently, sometimes every day of the week for meetings, some of those times not infrequently in the Situation Room on some pretty high-level national security issues. I was always dressed like you see me now. I'm wearing my bekisher because it's right after Shabbos, but I would always wear a black suit, a white shirt, a tie, hat, noticeable facial hair, and there was no mistaking me for a Jew. So I knew that every movement of mine, every facial expression, every word that came out of my mouth was going to be under scrutiny, heavy scrutiny. And so I always felt the pressure, immense pressure on my shoulders with my every move. So I'd like to think that I scored some nice wins, Shlomo, in all of my activity, whether it was participating in high-level meetings or dealing with an administrative assistant at work. Sometimes it was good policy and interesting input on a particular issue, and sometimes it was as simple as cracking a joke and making a couple of people laugh.
Shlomo, thank you for your good question. Let's move on to Kew Garden Hills. Stan on the phone with the question. Go ahead, Stan. Your question for our guest.
Forest Hills, not Kew Garden.
Forest. So, see, I saw you in Kew Garden Hills the other week. I confused you. Forgive me before Rosh Hashanah. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Two questions that really are out of the ordinary. In China, there is, as crazy as it seems, there are Jews in China, Chinese Jews. Did you ever get a chance, since you've been with the Trump administration, to investigate their persecution? I know it's not too many, but there has been Chinese Jews from the early 1920s. Have you had a chance to investigate that or find anything out about that?
Well, that's a great question, Stan, and I get the vach to you. I'm going to give you two great examples. Both of them are extremely interesting. So the first one is a current, like present day one. The other one dates back some time and relates most directly to your question to the Chinese Jews, and particularly the community in Kaifeng, China. But let's deal with modern day first. On this very program, a fellow that's tuned into the program is actually sitting in Taiwan. His name is Jeffrey Schwartz. He's been there for 50 years, a nice Jewish boy from Cleveland, Ohio. He is fluent in a couple of dialects of Chinese, has built up a great business there, a wonderful family. But his most impressive accomplishment, I believe, is building probably the most beautiful, extravagant Jewish community center that I've ever seen in the world. He's made Taiwan a stop for Jewry, and particularly Orthodox Jewry. They've got a beautiful meeting room, a ballroom, like a gourmet restaurant, a beautiful shul, a mikveh, every communal accoutrement that you could imagine. And that's in Taiwan today. So that's a good example of a Chinese Jew right here and right now. He actually holds an ROC passport. But let me give you the better one, which dates back a couple of years when I had the opportunity in 1986 to visit Kaifeng when I was in China. Just directly to your question, I wanted to explore the city and try to find where the synagogue that had existed since the Song Dynasty actually stood. There's still a cemetery with some matzevas, some gravestones that are still standing. And so I wanted to make a trip out there. It's a long story. It's detailed in the book. Much more time is required than we have on the show today, but I'll focus on specifically my meeting the granddaughter, and she was probably pushing 80, of the last halachic Chinese Jew who died in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He came from a long line. Originally, the community was comprised of traders from Persia that came to do trade in China on the eastern end of the Silk Road. The time that we went was just early on in the period of the Chinese opening up to the West. Communist control was very, very tight, all the way down to neighborhood Communist Party committees reporting on the activities and behavior of everybody on the street. So this woman naturally in the backwaters of China did not want to be seen as mingling with foreigners. I used my Chinese to try to engage her. I really didn't get anywhere with her at all. She would not respond to any of my questions. It wasn't until I returned to Beijing and then made my way to Hong Kong the following week, which was Rosh Hashanah, that I came to the realization that I think the real reason why she didn't engage with me and speak with me is because since it was so close to Rosh Hashanah, I think she was really upset that I didn't bring her bottle of Manischewitz.
Second question, May.
Shanghai. Right now, there is, as you know, the economics, the real estate market in China, specifically Shanghai, is in a depressive state. People who invested, Chinese who invested billions, are losing their money tremendously. Has the Trump administration or in your area have taken advantage of that or tried to do anything in terms of investment or something in Shanghai and the real estate market, or seen anything where they could take advantage of it?
Not during my time, Stan. I'd be surprised if that was on the table even now, but I'm sure that there are a bunch of distressed investors all over the world, including American distressed real estate investors who are looking at opportunities. Certainly when I was based in Hong Kong from 92 to 05, working in a very large law firm, as the cycles came and went, when we would hit rock bottom in a particular cycle and there was a lot of restructuring and distressed assets on the block, that's when we sometimes saw the greatest amount of activity. So you've hit it right on the head, Stan. I'm sure that a lot of investors are going in and looking at ops and getting their seat at the table in distressed real estate in China.
Thank you for a good question. I'm surprised you didn't mention the story. You actually saved the Jewish life in China of a woman rabbi. And because you speak Chinese fluently, you were able to save her. Tell us about that.
Well, it was the same trip, Zev, actually, to Kaifeng. We took a train, an overnight train from Beijing to get to Kaifeng. In those days, because of the controls on foreigners, every foreigner was required to register when they got to the city that they were traveling to. So we went to the China Travel Service office, which was located in the courtyard of the Kaifeng Hotel, a Communist Party owned and run hotel. We registered. We asked them where we might find the synagogue. After all, they were the state travel service. If anyone knew, they should know. They weren't particularly helpful. As I was going back and forth with them, trying to extract information on how we could find some of the Jewish sites, the general manager of the hotel came out and asked us if we spoke English. We said yes. We went in. He said that they needed somebody to help a lady who was not well, a foreigner. In those days, if somebody had a foreigner on their hands who was not well, God forbid, if there was an issue, it would have been a really big issue for the hotel. Nobody wanted that responsibility. Long story short, it was a woman from Los Angeles. She had very acute food poisoning. We recognized that we needed to get her to some medical facility to pump her up and hydrate her and get her some glucose and antibiotics. That was the story in and of itself. There were no ambulances. We had to put her in the back of a 1950s Soviet sedan.
And that was hard to find even a taxi, right? You couldn't just do it. It was problems.
Everything was difficult. We got her there. We finally got her the treatment that she required. They hooked her up to an intravenous, and finally, when
didn't they first want to hook her up to a heart machine?
Well, there was a fellow who had come from a clinic right across the street, which was just gifted an EKG machine, and so since he got a brand newfangled EKG machine, therefore, ergo, this woman must have been suffering from a heart issue. So yes, he did want to hook her up to the EKG machine, but that wasn't happening under our watch. So we got her over to this hospital facility. We got her the hydration and the glucose and the meds that she needed. When she started to come through, as we were bringing her to a room, she looked at me and she grabbed my arm and she said, "Please go back to the hotel, get me my tefillin because I must put them on because I have to say Shema." She thought that she wasn't going to make it, but she did make it through. And I did keep in contact with her for many, many years after that incident.
And you didn't bring her to tefillin either, right?
Say it again?
You did not bring her tefillin.
I couldn't find them, Zev. We went back and we couldn't locate them.
The Chinese took it?
I don't know what happened to them. God bless, but they weren't there when we went back.
Henya and Kranhai, thank you for waiting your question for our guest. Go ahead, Henya.
Hi, very interesting. I'm just curious, are you aware of any of the shluchim there in China? I mean, they're like in a lot of cities. And do you have any contact with them? Also, I know that they don't accept Judaism as a religion in China. Is there any way to change that?
I didn't get the first question, Zeb.
I want to know if you're in touch with any shluchim from Chabad in China. There is.
Of course. I lived in Hong Kong from 92 to 05. And Hong Kong is a part of China. When I moved there, and until now, Rabbi Mordechai Opson was and is the shaliach there. I still am in weekly contact, if not daily contact, with him. The shluchim
in Greenberg,
certainly in Beijing and Shanghai. Rabbi Greenberg is in Shanghai. Rabbi Freundlich is in Beijing. Shimon Freundlich, who used to eat at our house quite frequently when he lived in Hong Kong, is a very close friend. And Rabbi Greenberg is also a very good friend. And interestingly, now that you mentioned his name, he used to come to Hong Kong with his wife when she was delivering children. They didn't have,
Correct.
facilities that they really trusted in Shanghai at the time. So they used to come to our house, and a couple of his children one of them was almost birthed in my house. But yes, we know a number of the shluchim.
And how about accepting Judaism as a religion?
That's a good question.
Any way that you could, yeah.
Well, officially, there's no religion.
They recognize Christianity and Islam in China.
I'm not a Christian nor a Muslim, Zev. I've not looked into that.
I'm just saying they don't recognize Judaism. They do recognize the other religions.
Yeah, I can tell you that Rabbi Freundlich works tirelessly to maintain good relations with the relevant ministries. I'm not up on the ins and outs of the regulatory position, but I know that Rabbi Freundlich is doing a good job to ensure that all of the Chabad and other Jewish establishments are fully compliant, and he and others are running some very active Chabad programming and doing a great job to be Mekarev Yidden and provide support to from and non-from travelers that go to China and business people.
And Henry, thanks, some good questions.
Just one more thing.
Go-
Are you aware that every time they have a program or something, they have Chinese spies? I mean, this is like a real communist country. Are you afraid at all for your life or for anything that you say? Are you like extra careful? I mean, America, nobody's careful what they say.
I'm in Borough Park. Come over sometime and we'll have a chat offline.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
all right. And by the way, when I went to the Chabad, there was a Chinese man spying on Chabad when I was there for Pesach in Beijing.
Yeah,
So,
but Zev, I mean, let's be fair. They served them some very nice gefilte fish. Come on.
when I was there was pizza. It was after Pesach was over, so no gefilte fish. Everybody went straight for the pizza. That I can tell you. There's a mitzvah after Pesach is over to get the first pizza, and I think we got it when we were in Beijing for Pesach. Now, but how dangerous is China? You saw a lot of now. President Trump did tariffs then. People saying he's just doing things out of a hat. You were there and negotiated. So tell us more about the tariffs and negotiating, because Chinese are very, very tough. They want to dominate the world and they want to manipulate. They've done a good job, especially in the last 4 years before President Trump came back to office. They undid some of the things you did in the first Trump administration.
Yep, unfortunately. So let's unpack that a little bit and start at the top and talk about the role of tariffs. Your comment was that a bunch of people had commented on how disruptive tariffs are. So at the top, one could look at tariffs and say that they're a means of chaos, that they brought chaos. Another side of it, God gave us two hands. On the one hand, chaos. On the other hand, strategy and strategic. One could say that tariffs are used to penalize and to be punitive. And on the other hand, we could look at it and say that they're used for leverage. So I tend to be on the side of the other hand. And what I saw is that I spent 30 years representing foreign investors, foreign financial institutions in China, trying to push on the very issues that were at the core of our agenda, not making much progress at all, really no progress, very limited progress. And our country, our government, certainly during the 8 years of the Obama administrations, had been at the table with China in quarterly and sometimes monthly meetings with really no concrete deliverables. And it wasn't until President Trump came into office during Trump 45 that he actually dealt with the issue in a very impactful, demonstrable way. And the way that he got the Chinese to the table was through the tariffs. The tariffs were used to impose pain, financial pain, and he saw that, and he was correct in tariffs being the only means, or one of the key means, through which he could get the Chinese to the table. Once we got them to the table, we had a playbook. We had a core set of positions that we were pushing, and we pushed forward in a principled way, in an unwavering way, session after session after session after session, until we were able to deliver a deal that we felt was satisfactory for the American people. And it worked. With the tariffs being used as leverage up front, and principled discussions and firm positions, unwavering positions throughout the negotiations. We signed that deal in 2020, in January of 2020. It was the phase one US-China trade agreement. And then we were hit shortly after that with COVID. World markets went where they went. The global markets were disrupted. We had another couple of years under the Biden administration. Nothing of note really moved with China on the core issues during that time. And the president came back during Trump 47, January 21st, 2025, and literally within days, and maybe it was even the first day or first days, the president started with an emboldened tariff program. It was disruptive, it was fast, it was strategic. Many people felt that it was wreaking chaos in the global markets, but let's have a look at where we are and what it's delivered. In 6 months' time, the president has delivered agreements with around, let's call it 10 countries, Japan, the EU, South Korea, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, and a few others. And those countries represent just under 70% of the $1.2 trillion trade deficit that the president inherited on January 21st, 2025. That's a massive accomplishment. Those trade agreements sorted deficit issues, very important trade issues with those countries. Under some of those agreements, the president and his great negotiating team brought deals, like, for example, a multi-$100 billion agreement of Japan to invest in the United States, to assist in reviving our industrial base and bring more jobs to America. And in addition to that, the negotiating team also secured purchases of U.S. liquefied natural gas to further the president's energy dominance policy. So it's a triple whammy, triple benefit. But the most impactful part of that grand strategic plan is that the tariffs were used very strategically to get people to the table. The trade negotiating teams were able to settle deals with roughly 70% of the countries that were at issue, leaving only a couple. Some of them are real problem children. India is not easy. It's a tough negotiation. Israel is in there, Taiwan is in there. But the biggest piece of the remaining countries that are represented in the remaining deficit that's not been dealt with is China. And so the advantage of the approach that the president has taken is that, in effect, he's cleared the deck with a lot of countries so that his team and he could focus on the biggest issue of China.
Is China more difficult to work with today than when you were there in the first administration?
I'm not there, right?
What do you hear? You're in touch with your colleagues, right?
Yeah, I know a lot of the folks that are there. Many of them are former colleagues. It's a great, great team. And I cannot imagine that the issues have gotten easier. And in fact, Zev, you point out a good issue. In some ways, matters have gotten more complicated because the trade issues are still the trade issues. The trade issues that were on the table in 45 are still on the table now in 47. But on top of the trade issues, we've got some other really big issues lurking. For example, China dominance in rare earths and critical metals that are so integral to so many areas of production, right? Magnets, other things, semiconductors as well. And the Chinese are using that dominance that they have in those areas as their leverage on us, while at the same time we've got a little piece in our back pocket, which is the TikTok dispute. And you'll probably be aware that Secretary Bessent was in Europe, in Madrid last week, and it appears that at least the president has announced and the secretary has announced that they've come to an agreement in principle on TikTok. And I'm sure that the team used the upper hand that we have in respect of TikTok to procure movement from the Chinese on issues that are important to us. But it's complicated.
It's complicated because the Chinese can say we can stall for 4 years. Well, actually, with another 2 or 3.5 years, maybe there'll be a Democratic administration. Because you're right that some of the initiatives in the first administration you enacted were undone by the Biden administration, including the Chinese have a Belt and Road program where they give assistance to countries. Actually, I didn't realize the Trump administration also gave assistance to countries and helped that, including Panama, and that was undone during the Biden years.
Yeah, so I want to be clear, Zev. We didn't give assistance per se. What we did, and this was an initiative that I'm really proud of because I designed it and I spearheaded the implementation. What we did is we went globally. We started in the Western Hemisphere. We were also working in Asia. We were working in Europe. We were working in the Middle East. But what we would do with every country is we would go in and we would look at their growth plans for energy and infrastructure, which is really the cornerstone of all economic growth in any country. And we would identify opportunities where our partners in these countries could realize good, healthy growth for their countries through specific projects that we would help them frame. And then we would help them structure them and bring them to market utilizing private capital, not subsidized public capital. which is good for those countries, good for our country. And ultimately, we brought some really great deals to fruition. In Panama, we helped them refinance their energy utilities, saved them a lot of taxpayer dollars in debt service. We did a massive program in Ecuador, a $3.5 billion program. We did some really big deals in Vietnam on the LNG front. But to your point a little bit earlier about folks' views on time spectrum, where let's think about it. You mentioned the Chinese thinking 4 years, another administration, we legged them over during Biden, maybe we'll get a Democratic. So you're absolutely right in what you're saying. The Chinese have a 5,000-year history, right? So to them, what's 4 years? A year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years is nothing. But I think what we really need is a couple of Yidden on the team as well, right? And Secretary Lutnick is, of course, Jewish as well, because we have a similar perspective.
But they don't have any Hasidim on the team.
Okay, well, we need to get one. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, Zev. I feel that every person from our circles, and other circles, people of faith, people of principle, need to be in government, need to be assisting, need to be putting their hand in, and everybody should have a seat at the table, in my view.
But how many Chinese-speaking Hasidim are there aside from you?
There are a couple of others, not too many. You got it right. And, I think we have to be non-denominational on this issue, Zev. We got to be open employers on this one.
So I know you want more people to have a seat at the table. I want to thank you for joining us, Mitchell Silk. He's written a fascinating book, must read. It's called A Seat at the Table, an inside account of Trump's global economic revolution. He's also a former Assistant Secretary for International Markets, U.S. Department of Treasury. What's your next book about?
So I have a book done. It's already laid out. It's called Upwards, and it's a 600-page book about the lore and the history of the first Woman Rabbi, mystical rabbi from what's now Western Ukraine. My grandfather was born there. Our family has been aligned with the dynasty for many generations. And it's really a gripping read, a page turner. Every page, I wrote it in a manner that I hope every page will deliver inspiration and daily relevant takeaways.
And you also have historical, do you have a mystery novel or another what book you have coming out?
Yes, I took the core of the stories and I used some of them to actually write an historical novel. This is a little bit of a spoiler here, Zev, but I will have it's done. We're in the final stages of editing, and I hope to deliver to the public the first historical novel, true to fact, on a Hasidic rabbi.
Looking forward to that. Mitchell Silk, thank you for joining us, Shana Tov. Your book is tremendous. Thank you for what you've done, your service to the country, not just to the Jewish people. Look forward to having you back again, Shana Tova.
Thank you so much, Zev, as always, for having me, and get the vach and the git ben shur.
There he is, Mitchell Silk, doing a tremendous job. He did a tremendous job, and he still encouraged more people to get a seat at the table. If you want a seat at the table, read the book.